This is what we need to do. This is going to bring that school to the next level.
That's Thinkering. This Thinkering process is going to be really transformational to all subjects that we're talking about.
The value of the Alliance is it's a thinking collective. Now we have a greater understanding amongst everyone. And that's not what's common in schools.
I always tell our students this can set you apart, make you stand out, something to remember you by. It's an opportunity to share. It's win-win all around.
I think the biggest part of what we do are the humans that we work with on the other side of that, right? Really see the human impact, the way that they're interacting and working with their community.
It really does have to flip. You should be able to think about that as your hero's journey, to be able to know this is how I was able to overcome.
And I feel like continuing that mission is really important.
All right. Hey, everybody, welcome to Thinkering Minds, where we explore what's possible when education becomes more human, more curious, and more connected. Today's guest is someone who's helped shape the story of future of learning, Jared Geller, educator turned marketing leader at Synthesis, an AI-powered learning platform that captures imaginations with its bold learner-first approach to problem solving. He went from educator to marketing leader for an ed tech company. And then, what does marketing with purpose look like? And how do we humanize learning in the age of AI? Because all big topics. So welcome to the show. And why don't you tell the people who you are, because you can do a better job than I can do.
Thanks, Jim. Really excited to be here. So my name's Jared. I started off as a pre-K teacher. Well, really, I did teach for America, so I did not go to school to be a teacher. I went to business school, and then I decided that I didn't want to take the traditional path that a lot of my fellow B school classmates were taking. And so I decided to apply to Teach for America. They placed me in a pre-K classroom in Oklahoma City, which I loved. And from there, I think I really had a lot of advantages going into education without having an education background, because I was coming to things from first principles. And I was just figuring out, what is not only like, how do I teach the things that were asked of me to teach in the classroom, which I sort of abandoned, frankly. It was more about like, what are they capable of learning and what do they need to learn? And I quickly realized that the standard pre-K early childhood curriculum is very, very limited. It's very tightly scoped to a few concepts that frankly these kids could learn in a few weeks, and it's stretched out over the course of an entire year. And then it doesn't really tap into their interests. It doesn't really make learning relevant to them. And so my mandate that I put on myself was not to get kids to learn a few shapes or, a couple letters or whatever. We were learning all of our letter sounds. We were reading on first grade level by the time we were done the year. But that wasn't the focus. The focus was, this is a child's first impression with learning, their first impression of school. And I wanted to make that first impression really matter. And I wanted kids to fall in love with learning, to understand, to explore their curiosities, to put a lot of different topics and themes in front of them so that they could quickly find the things that they were passionate about that struck an interest for them. And the way I always saw it was, this was in 2013. So obviously things have changed a lot since then, especially when it comes to autodidacticism and, self-driven learning. But I always saw, even at that point with the internet, with YouTube, that if kids found their passion, if they found the thing that they were interested about at a young age and they dove into it and they got obsessed with it, especially at 4 or 5, then by the time they graduated high school, they could have a PhD level knowledge of something. And that could really go on to, shifting the trajectory of the world. Obviously not like the 50 kids that I taught my 3 years in the classroom. Maybe they can shift the world. One person can do it. So, but in any case, that was sort of my idea, was let me expose these kids to a lot of different things. Let me put it in a really coherent, I guess you would call it project-based format, but that's not how I was thinking of it at the time. And so I built the curriculum from scratch, covered everything from your local community to, the biggest global kind of ideas that you could have. Had a whole unit on entrepreneurship and business, had a whole unit on environmentalism and nature. And so we sort of bridged the gap every week, sort of built on itself. And it just exposed kids to a lot of different topics. And like I said, if they could find something that struck a chord with them, then they could then pursue that for a really long time and with vigor, potentially, at the very least, set themselves up for a really positive future that was fulfilling for them. So that's how I started as an educator. Stayed in the classroom for a while. I wrote some curriculum for Child Care Network, got back into the classroom. COVID hit and didn't want to do that anymore. And then I ended up at Synthesis. And at Synthesis, I've worked my way from building curriculum for our original product, just we used to call it old Synthesis. Now it's just not old Synthesis. We called it Synthesis. Now it's Synthesis Teams, which are very interesting, complex games that allow kids to work in teams collaboratively to solve big problems, to learn communication, decision making, really just judgment in general. And then I moved over to Synthesis Tutor when we launched that. And then at Synthesis Tutor, I started off writing content, building out our lessons, in our AI math product, moved up to become the director of product, and then became the head of marketing. Sort of, we don't have to get into that whole story, but now I run marketing at Synthesis, particularly for the tutor, but for the whole company. But that's obviously I spent a lot more time talking about my background in education. There's a lot of interesting things to go into Synthesis, but I've been talking for a while, so I'll stop there.
Yeah, no, that's great. It's like classroom roots, creative chops, and then using all of that to develop and scale a product that's transformational. So you need the creative and unique background that ties into education, but outside the box problem solving solutions. That's what it's going to take to get it done. What was the moment when Synthesis felt like more than a product and like maybe more of a movement that you wanted to shape?
It's a great question. I think the moment started before I got there. Like I was sort of tracking Synthesis for a long time, for over a year while I was in the classroom, waiting for some type of position to open up that wasn't an engineering position. And what I found in a lot of, especially, or not just startups, just educational companies, as I was leaving the classroom, they're not really looking for a lot of educators, which is ironic. And it's frustrating because you're like, I've got all these ideas and this perspective on what this educational product should deliver. And they're like, yeah, we don't really want teachers. And Synthesis is different in that regard. Like we have a lot of former teachers. We have plenty that aren't, but we have a lot of former teachers. So anyway, to answer your question, there was sort of some shine around Synthesis before that. It was doing something different. It was started at the SpaceX school that Elon developed with one of our co-founders, Josh Don. And so it just had a real mystique about it that was different than everything else. It had an edge to it. It was just cool, cutting edge, treating education differently. Original mission, it's still our mission, but it was more prominent all over the website then, still on the website, but it was advancing human progress through education. So the ambition, the high level thinking of Synthesis, it wasn't just a program to like occupy your kids or, teach them something that they can learn in school. It was to really accelerate. And that's maintained throughout the iterations of both products, the Teams and Tutor. And then I would say like when I came over to Tutor, because that was sort of a new project that we launched, that felt pretty groundbreaking immediately just because of the interface that we have. So you have a chat bot. For all intents, there's AI built into it. It's not just a chat bot, but you have an agent on the left-hand side that's talking to the student while they're working through something in the workplace. So it's a very visual, hands-on, tactile, like multi-sensory way to learn. And we don't ask you to just like listen to a lecture and answer questions or play a game and answer questions, which I always think of as like digitized worksheets or digitized lectures. This is a digitally native platform. It's not taking something that you can do offline and bringing it online, like a Khan Academy, for example, or really any of the math games that you may play online, which are just gamified worksheets. That's all fine. There's a place for that. But I think immediately we realized that this was a digitally native platform and that afforded us a lot of opportunities to really push the boundaries and to become something that's not just a supplement, but something that is a full-on enhancement for teachers and can actually do teaching alongside teachers. So you don't have to worry about the teacher having to go over a concept over and over and over again, and then or go over it once and then allow practice to cover the rest of it. The tutor will also teach and will make sure that students are stepping through a problem incrementally. If they can go faster, they will. If they get something wrong, the tutor will stop, slow it down, break the problem into bite-sized pieces, ask students to do the separate pieces of it, ask them what they just did. Do they understand what they just did? Students answer, moves on, puts all those pieces together, goes back, takes the whole problem itself, does it again. So it's much more holistic. It's very close to the way we operate is like, what would a real person do in this situation? What would the world's best tutor, the world's best teacher, what would they do in this situation when a student gets something wrong? And that's how we build the software. And then we integrate AI where it's necessary, and we try not to use it where it may hallucinate, where it may do things that, if you go to ChatGPT and ask it to teach you fractions, it's going to spit out. You should try it. It'll ask you to spit out just pages and pages of words. We all know like that's not the way to like learn fractions. You have to be doing things. You have to be stepping through it. You have to be feeling it, moving things around, understanding how the parts fit into the whole, both figuratively and literally. So anyway, again, I'm a long-winded person, so I'm going to give long-winded answers. It's probably good for taking up time in the podcast. But Jim, you can cut me off whenever. But yeah, I think the moments where, like I said, before joining and then seeing the tutor in action and I speak to tutor teams, is fantastic too, but tutor's where I spent the last two plus years. And so that's where like most of my attention is spent.
Yeah, no, I like long-winded answers. It makes podcasting easy.
Correct. Totally.
You kind of addressed my next two questions that I had, which was what's the heartbeat of synthesis? And to me, when you were talking, acceleration and doing it in what would a human be doing, but without any of the negatives that might come with the human interaction or have to deal with that. Yeah. Would you agree that's the heartbeat?
I would say that's the heartbeat. I would say there's a few heartbeats. That would be one. Another one would just be the tone of the tutor is really, really important to us. And so one, we see a lot of feedback from our families talking about how the patience of the tutor is just something that really comes through. There's no pressure. It's not like, you got something wrong, or, keep trying. You don't know what they're doing. Some apps, you get something wrong, it sort of shakes at you. And it's like, try again, which is like, fine. But now I'm just clicking and then they're like, great job. You clicked, there's 4 answers. You clicked all 4 of them. You finally clicked the right one. It's like, amazing. You did it. And doesn't really exemplify any learning. Like when you get something wrong, the tutor is very like, that was a really great chance. If it's like kind of a tricky question, maybe like, I see what you were thinking there. Maybe you thought it was this. That's really great thinking. Let's walk through it together. And so what we see is a lot of families talking about how that's something that really resonates with them, especially neurodivergent, neuroatypical students. We see a lot of success with ADHD, with ASD, students that may feel that the traditional system might leave them behind, and that it's asking these questions. Realistically, even just kids that are behind, the goal is to accelerate, but it's to accelerate you from where you are at and to recognize where you're at. So there's a lot of competency-based ideas that are built into this, and not just like, you're on 3rd grade, you're in 3rd grade, you're starting with 3rd grade content. Like we don't really structure our content that way around grade levels. We structure it around conceptual pieces. So we have units on, versus a 1st grade unit, we have a unit on addition, on place value, and things like that. And then we progress you through the whole unit from beginning to end. So you start to build on all your knowledge and build on what you've previously known as well. But one of the things is about meeting you where you are and then allowing you to accelerate as fast as you can from there. But if you need to slow down, that's okay too. And if you get a little ahead of yourself, we'll back you up and make sure that you're on a pace that's reasonable and feels comfortable for you. And so that's like a huge part of how we think about it. And so I think that all sort of fits into under tone, which is how I answered it originally. And so, yeah, I think the tone is a huge part of the heartbeat, and just making sure that kids feel supported, whether they're ready to fly or whether they need to go through things slowly. I think that's missing in a lot of cases. It's certainly missing in school through no fault of the teachers. Common Core sort of says you start 3rd grade, there's no real time to back up and make sure you have all the 2nd grade standards. It's like, well, it's in the Common Core curriculum, so it was taught, and so it was learned, and so it. And so we're ready to go on. And there's no slack in the system to allow you to go back. The slack has to be created by like teachers doing superhuman feats. And so one of the things that we think about with the tutor is like, always enabling teachers and parents and students, everybody, to be able to go at their own pace and to not have to worry about those kinds of things of being left behind. You'll never be left behind with Synthesis Tutor. So I think that's like a core tenet of the whole product and philosophy. And I would say that is the heartbeat of the product.
As somebody who dabbles in marketing myself, you have one of the most interesting marketing challenges that I've come across, and you're going to have to introduce the concept because I'm going to flub it. You talked to me about tutoring can move somebody's progress 2 standard deviations. And ever since you introduced that to me, that's the most amazing thing on earth. And how do you market that? And it's such a complicated thing to make that attractive, but it's the most attractive thing in the world if you can just, grasp it and consume it. Like, how do you tackle that?
The 2 standard deviation piece is the Bloom's 2 sigma problem, which is saying 2 sigma, 2 standard deviations, which is saying that a one-on-one personal tutor will move you 2 standard deviations from the mean and the mean being, I guess, your standard classroom setting, where there's 30 different students, 30 different abilities, 1 lecture, 1 activity to try and work through that. And so that becomes very difficult. Yeah. So ironically, the language of 2 standard deviations, unfortunately, statistics is not taught well in our school system. And so using that type of language is probably not the best from a marketing standpoint. I'm sure the audience that's listening to this gets it immediately. And if you don't, that's okay. But like I said, not your fault. I don't think I took a statistics course until college, but it's certainly not like great marketing language is saying 2 standard deviations. It's like, well, what does that mean? What's the mean? Even if you know the answer, it's like, well, where are we moving from? So it's really just about like, you will learn faster than school can teach you. And that's one of the angles that we've taken. Sometimes it's successful, sometimes it's not. Depends on the channel, depends on the audience. But that's how we typically tried to push it, is that you learn faster than you ever thought possible. And it's not because we're just like pushing you to go as fast as possible, but it's like we are making sure we're taking the time, the patience to teach a core concept, something like place value, where you might go through 20 minutes, but it's 20 minutes of totally immersive, totally personalized one-on-one instruction. Somebody that's there one-on-one with you that will not move on until they're sure that you have it, that you've understood it, that you grasp and grok all of the nuances of it. And really a big piece of the tutor is the mathematical intuition behind something. So it's not just like, here's a formula for something, or here's the standard algorithm for multiplication. It's like understanding, like, why does that algorithm work, and doing it visually and tactilely and moving things around and seeing it and responding at each step of, like, let's say, like using the area model, for example, to teach the standard multiplication, the long multiplication algorithm. And so you can start to see why, if you do that well, then it starts to, this is probably like, here I am explaining in words. It would be better if I had a visualization for you. But if you do use the area model, then you'll actually understand foiling. So when you get to that in high school, you'll have a much better understanding of why you can foil and how to break up problems and how to simplify things for yourself, how to split numbers apart, put them back together. So it develops all this place value, number sense, all of these other aspects by being able to see things visually like that. And then the formulas that you're sort of been given to memorize make a lot more sense to you. So these are the kinds of things that are done in Synthesis Tutor to allow us to achieve these types of results of acceleration, of moving to standard deviations. And I think, like, right now where the product is, like, you could reasonably put your kindergartner on Synthesis Tutor. And because the way it steps through things is so incremental and so patient, it's not going to allow you to just jump right into fractions before you understand the foundational pieces of that, then your kindergartner could get through the content. They're never going to hit a point where it's like, I'm unable to process this cognitively, because everything is so step by step. Like, let's get this first part good. Okay, now we're going to go one little step above that and one little step above that. And so you're always just moving along this progression. And then before you know it, you're in second, third grade content, and you're learning how to add, 5-digit numbers together, how to multiply, 2-digit numbers together, whatever. And you're getting there in a way where it's like, that didn't feel like I just jumped all that much. One of the things that I always talk about is in elementary school, what you'll see is, let's use like long addition, for example. So it's like first grade, you add single digit numbers. Second grade, you add double digit numbers. Third grade, you add 3-digit numbers. Fourth grade, you add 4-digit numbers. And it's like the concept is the same. There's a place value element to it. There's an addition element, a computational element to it. But it's like, why do we have to wait to add a 3-digit number why do we have to wait a whole year before we get from 2-digit numbers to 3-digit numbers? So in Synthesis Tutor, you're not going to wait a whole year. You're going to like sort of extrapolate and expand that concept. As soon as you understand how place value interfaces with the addition, there's no reason to stop at tens. Like, you can go, okay, now like let's take it to the next step. Let's do hundreds. And there's nothing harder about that, right? I would use this example in my classroom as well when I was teaching 4-year-olds, like 3D shapes, for example. Like, whoa, 3D shapes, those don't come into play until you don't have to learn those till third grade. You don't have to learn what a rhombus is until fourth grade. It's like they're looking at a geometric figure and they are labeling it. So the cognitive ability to label a square is the same as labeling a rhombus or a cone or a rectangular prism. It's like, I'm looking at this shape, I'm giving it a name. And the school system will impose arbitrary constraints as to where these things live in their progression through school. But realistically, it actually makes more sense for it to all live in the same space because you're practicing this one concept. Why cut them short? Like, I want to learn what that shape is. It's like, not for 3 more years. Like, no. And at Synthesis, we do not operate that way. We find the things that live in their proper place, and we make sure that, and we leverage that. Like, you're learning this particular concept here. Let's leverage that and accelerate you at this moment where it makes most sense, where we're in the context, you understand how everything's functioning. If we come back to it a year later, guess what? Now we have to spend a week reviewing what you learned last year, reminding you of all of the conceptual underpinnings and foundational frameworks. Now we can just, and then we're ready to be like, okay, so you remember how adding 2-digit numbers works? Now let's apply it to 3 digits. And it works the same way for X, Y, and Z and blah, 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 blah. Not how we do it in Synthesis. And so that's one of the reasons too, why going back to the original question about the 2 standard deviations, about the acceleration, that's one of the things that makes it really effective. In addition to what I was saying before about the tone and the personalization and the patience. And so that patience it will not feel slow to the student because it's at their level. An adult watching may say like, oh, it's being really patient. But realistically, it's like in 20 minutes, you're going to learn something that's going to take 2 weeks in a large classroom setting. And in 6 weeks, you're going to learn something that's going to take you 3 years in a classroom setting, just because of the way that the content is scaffolded and structured.
I love it. What stuck out to me there is anytime somebody's doing something really important, there's always that concept that slow is fast. When there's a SWAT team moving in, when a surgeon's operating with a scalpel, slow is fast. And what you're talking about there is that same mentality, taking the time to make sure every step matters, every action is meaningful, no wasted time, no wasted space. That's really cool. I like that. Another thing you keep doing is you keep answering the question right before I get into it. And you're touching on, like at Thinkering, we're obsessed with making learning human. And, Synthesis Tutor being an AI tool, immediately people are going to question that. But I think you jumped onto something that's really informative for me, which is the patience aspect, that slow is fast. A human educator is going to get impatient at some point. They're going to want to rush something at some point. That's just human nature. The student is going to want to rush something when they can feel frustration from the educator. We've all been in the classroom when we've raised our hand, we've asked a question, and we could sense that the educator didn't grasp what we were trying to say. They wanted to move on and we let them. And, we settled for that. And you really don't have to with this synthesis platform. And that really sticks out to me. What else are you all doing to lean into the humanity aspect of education?
So one of the things, just to touch on the AI piece, is we are only leveraging AI. I mentioned this earlier, but I sort of breezed past it, is we're only using AI where it makes sense. And so, like I said, we do not want the AI like coming up with the lesson plans, coming up with the ideas. We are sort of containing it to where it can be personalized. It can talk to you about your interests. It can start to route you according to things that you may say that you want. I want to learn about this. Okay, great. Like, let me take you to that lesson. Oh, I'm interested in these things. Like, cool. I'll try to like integrate that in some way. It won't be integrated in a way where it's like, oh, you like chickens, we're going to count chickens, but it might mention something about, oh, this reminded me of, if you tell the tutor you like baseball, for example, it'll be like, wow, you really hit that one out of the park. It'll say stuff like that. So it will lean into your interests to make it more personalized, but it will not we will only let it handle the pedagogical aspects of it where it makes sense and where we can be totally sure that it won't hallucinate. I mean, the AI models have gotten better in this regard, but when they first came out, and they'll still do this, if you correct it, it'll correct itself, it'll back off. But when they first came out, if you were like, what's 2 + 2? And it's like, it's 4. And you're like, no, it's 5. It'd be like, oh, my mistake. Of course, it's 5. And so like they've gotten better. They won't do that anymore. But those kinds of things, you want to put a lot of guardrails on it. So the AI is like, we don't want AI teaching your kids, not yet at least. It's not ready for it. Maybe it's ready for tutoring you on Socratic dialogue or something like that. It's a good tool for those kinds of things, talking about, walk me through the Odyssey. It's really useful for those kinds of things, to walk me through this philosophical theory. Great for that. Not great for teaching 7-year-olds how to multiply. So anyway, that's one piece of keeping the personal. And then it's just always adding those little personal touches, finding where we spend a lot of time even thinking about, you get something wrong, like what's the language that's used to indicate that you're incorrect without making you feel that you did something wrong or that you're dumb or anything like that. Instead of just being like wrong or that's not it. Like sometimes that feels kind of shitty. We'll try to be like, that we use a lot of like, not quite. Or, I see what you were thinking there. And we try not to do that in a patronizing way. Like if a kid answers, one of our ads will show a child breaking a square into 2 quarters and a half. And if they label one of the quarters 1/3, because there's 3 pieces, this is one of our sort of shining moments. There's many of them, but this is one that we've captured in an ad. And so if they write 1/3 for one of the quarters, because there's only 3 pieces, we do understand what they're thinking. And so we do try to put them in those situations as well, not to trick them, but to assure that they do understand the concept at a deep level and try to catch the misunderstanding. So trying to see the misunderstandings before they happen, or the common misconceptions, or the things that may manifest from some misunderstanding, even though something's been explained, and then try to present those problems to them. So then we can either assess if they understand it at a deep level, so they're not confused by it. And if they are confused by it, great learning opportunity, and also a great moment to be like, I totally get why you did that. That was totally reasonable. Let's walk through why this is the answer, instead of just being like, that's not it, try again, which feels like, well, it's totally reasonable for them to put 1/3 there if they're learning fractions to begin with. So telling them to try again, and like, okay, maybe it's 1/4, 1/5, who knows? And then oh yeah, great, you did it, amazing. It's like much better to like have a clear mental model of where the student's model is and be able to address those things. So we're always trying to create scenarios that are constructed around those kinds of moments. One, they do make great marketing material, but that's not the reason why. That's just sort of a secondary effect. It's really because it highlights it's a real opportunity to make sure that the student does fully understand things versus just giving them like a problem set of like 6 or 7 of the same problems, but actually constructing something where there is some ambiguity, where there may be some confusion, and then being able to tell them, like I said, I'm repeating myself at this point, but be able to tell them like, yeah, that was good. Like you were thinking, you made a very reasonable answer there. And kids really respond well to that. Yeah, I guess I did it was reasonable. That's why I answered it that way. And so you're affirming them, but at the same time, like building on their engagement and building into understanding it a little bit deeper and more correctly.
Yeah, I like that example too, because the kid's absolutely right. It is 1/3 of the pieces there.
Right.
You know, like
Right, exactly.
they're not wrong. It was the question worded correctly, you know, was it presented correctly? Were they just thinking through that lens already? Which yeah, that's fascinating. I like that a lot. It's a great example. And how do you capture these cool stories? Being like an online platform, how do you kind of capture the real life impact? What's the core takeaway from the stories that you're seeing?
So one, we do have, obviously we have like surveys that people write in. These types of moments are usually captured through our beta testers who are testing out like our new lessons and seeing how they go. And our developers will watch them and figure out they were confused here. The language that I used in that particular question may have not been quite right, or maybe I didn't step them up to this. You know, maybe I moved a little too quickly. Maybe I moved a little too slowly. I'll tell you, when you watch other people use your product, even when you watch like other adults use it, you feel it a lot differently. You do feel like that's like moving a little too slow, or oh, that moved a little too fast, or that language wasn't quite right, or whatever. Or sometimes you're like, that hit, that was good, I nailed that one. And so we do have a group of beta testers. We're always looking to add. So if anyone's interested in getting their child as a beta tester for Synthesis Tutor, feel free, reach out. So that's one way we capture it. The other way is like just, we just capture a lot of people writing in saying, wow, this has been transformational for my student, either through surveys or just reaching out directly to our customer support or commenting on Facebook ads or Instagram ads. And, we joke about like, that I need to stop making sock puppet accounts and writing these things because the things that we hear from families are so unbelievable that you're like, one, it's like a marketer couldn't have written this. Like, there's no way. It almost sounds like too good to be true. It does sound too good to be true, but it is true. So there's like a meme around the company that, I have sock puppet accounts and I go around and I write these incredible things that like nobody could ever come up with. That's not what's happening. I do not do that. I do not have the time to do that. And I couldn't come up with, like I said, I couldn't come up with the things that people write. And so we get just tremendous testimonials. If you go to the testimonials page on our website, it's in the footer, I believe. It might be linked somewhere else on the landing page, but you'll just see people saying like how transformational Synthesis Tutor was, that their kids they've tried every math platform. The kid wouldn't sit still with it. They didn't like it. This is the only one that kids will use. This is the only one. And it's very unique in the marketplace. There's nothing out there that will actually take the time to teach this way. There's sort of like, because it's bidirectional, because the product is bidirectional, it's taking the input in from the student and it's adjusting from there versus like it's unidirectional or it's unidirectional where it's like a lecture, take in all the information, answer some questions, and then like sort of like program responses like, no, that's wrong. Read these words. Let me explain why versus like do this thing so you understand why. And so I think that bidirectional nature of it, where you feel like you are interacting with a person or with an agent. I think a lot of kids, they do personify the tutor as their friend. Those are things that really stand out about the product. They tell us, they're out here telling us all the time that the product is transformational. And I keep using that word because that's the word that we see. That's the most encompassing word that we have, is just, it has transformed my child's confidence, their abilities, their relationship with math, like their relationship with school. We'll see people say things like, my kid was behind, they've caught up in like 2 months, 3 months with this platform. They're no longer intimidated by math. These kinds of things that are just, you're not going to get that from some game. They might have fun with the games and they might be like, whoa, look, I accumulated 362 coins, and those coins I can use to like buy a house or whatever in the game. Who knows? My little avatar's got a new hat. It's adorable. But ultimately, like, that doesn't change the relationship with math. It makes them have a positive relationship to that game. This actually like kids can extend it out from, oh, it's not just that I like the tutor. It's like, I like math now. Like now I see it, I feel it, I get it. It clicks. That's one of the things that we'll say a lot is like, this is math that clicks. And I think that's true. I think that's how we think about developing the product. I think that's how we think about marketing the product, because that is what the product does. It makes it click for you. And that's what I said earlier about the intuition piece is like, yeah, you develop that intuition piece and all the formalisms that get attached on top of it, the notation, the formulas, those kinds of things. Those are all downstream of the intuitions and which starts with the physical intuitions around the math is, grabbing 10 dots and seeing them group into a group of 10. And then understanding why do we even use groups of 10s? Why not groups of 11s? Why not groups of 9s? Like, why are groups of 10 so important? And we have a whole history lesson on that and how, math progressed from tallies to Egyptian symbols to Roman numerals to finally the base 10 system that we use. And you can see the efficiency gains at each point, and you can see the downsides of each particular system until we get to the base 10 system, which makes a lot of sense. And then you understand why we use it. And if you understand why we use it and how it came about, then you start to understand, okay, like why is 10 2 digits and not just a single digit? And frankly, that's like a whole nother story, diatribe on the number 10 and how it's taught, and that it sort of feels like a unified one thing. And when really it's a group of 10 and 0 1s. And that's like, if kids understood that at a much younger age versus like 10 is a thing and 11 is a thing and 12 is a thing, that actually makes it harder to disentangle later. But anyway, that's like getting really in the weeds. I'm sure we don't want to get into like my problems with the numbers 10, 11, and 12. People don't need to hear that.
We'll save that for another episode. Yeah. We dive into whether base 10 is really worth it or not.
Love the term thinkering, and we'll definitely use it in my classroom. The kids will love it.
This is where we can be that peer support network with each other. When the big picture clicks, it's beautiful when you get administrators and teachers together.
You can't be a leader of other people if you can't first lead yourself, right?
Help the educator have a very clear and structured framework.
Becomes this real community hub. If you're a great educator, you're looking for the most powerful moment. Can we inspire kids to believe that the world needs who they were made to be?
I hope you guys continue to uphold that legacy and continue, finding kids like you.